As you can see from our screen, today we will be discussing the global marketing environment. And we are going to discuss a number of issues as they relate to the environmental factors that firms are posed with when they decide to go global with their marketing activities. So we will be discussing the global marketing environment and the different factors within this environment that affect the global marketing activities of firms. So as usual, by the end of this session, there are certain learning outcomes that we hope to achieve. The first one is that we hope to be able to define regional economic integration and identify different levels of integration that firms may identify that the countries that they want to enter into are engaged in. And then we will also be able to discuss the implications associated with regional economic integration for marketers, because all these different levels of integration come with consequences that marketers have to deal with when they are deciding on whether or not to go global with their marketing offering. We will also discuss the political and legal environment, as well as the socio-cultural environment, and again, how these two environments influence the activities of the global marketer and how they are able to adjust themselves or how they are supposed to behave in the presence of these different factors to be able to ensure that they succeed in their global marketing activities. So we'll begin the lecture by first discussing the economic environment. So as you will learn very soon, when it comes to global marketing, there are 4 levels of the global marketing environment that are of importance to the global marketer. We can talk about the economic environment, the political environment, the legal environment, as well as the socio-cultural environment. And please, before I go on, if there's anything that anyone requires clarification with, kindly indicate so that we can clarify before we proceed. Okay, so like I was saying, we will be talking about these 4 types of environment and how they affect the marketer and the implications that they have for the global marketer's strategy and decision making. So let's start from the economic environment. So when we talk about the economic environment, we are basically referring to the level of development in whatever foreign markets that the firm has identified that they want to do business in. Now, economic development results usually from one of 3 types of economic activity. And these levels of economic activity contribute to economic development in different ways, depending on the country that you are talking about or the country that is within your purview. And these 3 types of economic activity are the primary, secondary, and tertiary forms of economic activity. And when we talk about primary economic activities, we are basically talking about all those things that are concerned with agriculture and the extractive processes. So farming, mining in terms of gold, coal mining, fish farming, growing of crops, all these things fall under the primary economic activities. Then beyond that, we have the secondary economic activities that mainly have to do with manufacturing activities, which are involved in converting the output of the primary economic activities into products for consumers to obtain and use to satisfy their needs. So anything manufacturing that converts raw material into finished products. For instance, the gold that is mined is often converted into various forms of beautiful artifacts and jewelry, as well as some tools that go into machinery for operation. We also see how various produce from agriculture are converted into different products like canned tomatoes, canned soup bases, among other things for consumers to purchase to satisfy their various needs and wants. Now, beyond primary and secondary activities, we can talk about tertiary activities, and these are the ones that are basically reliant on services. So here we encompass everyone from the bankers to the insurers to those working in the tourism industry, as well as those working in the healthcare industry, who provide various forms of services to satisfy customer needs. So considering the output of these 3 different economic activities, we are able to determine the level of economic development that is at play in a particular foreign market that we want to enter into. And this is a major determinant of whether or not the marketer will be.
Hello, madam.
Yes.
Please, respectfully.
Yes.
Can you slow down a bit for us?
Sure, I will. Okay, so where did I lose you?
The truth be told, my this thing is I'm having hitches on my network. So
it's not because I'm fast. Perhaps it's because your network is
but you are still fast because somebody has even sent a message that you're moving faster. I think they'll also.
Okay. Okay, I just saw it. All right. So where do I take it from? Where did you get lost?
Doc, to help with that, I think maybe you can start with the primary, the secondary, and tertiary activities that are embedded in the economic development.
Okay, so I'll take it from there. All right. So what I said was that the first environment that the global marketer considers most is the economic environment. Now, the economic environment is the environment that helps the marketer to be able to determine whether or not there's enough potential in the prospective markets they want to enter into to necessitate a strategy to be formulated for that market. So to be able to ascertain the viability of these markets based on the economic environment, we consider the level of economic development that is prevailing in these markets. And to be able to determine the level of economic development, we rely on three main types of economic activity. The first one being primary economic activity, the second one being secondary economic activity, and the third one being tertiary economic activity. So when it comes to primary economic activities, we are basically talking about those activities that are concerned with extraction and agriculture. So with regard to primary economic activities, we can talk about things like farming, fishing, as well as mining, where they are mining all forms of minerals from bauxite to coal to iron to gold. But beyond the primary economic activities, we can talk about secondary economic activities. That mainly encapsulates the manufacturing activities that converts the output of the primary economic activities into finished products to be able to satisfy customer needs and wants. So under secondary economic activity, we can talk about industries like the toothpaste manufacturing industries, the tin tomato manufacturing industry, the biscuits manufacturing industry. Generally, we can talk about the FMCG industry. All these are manufacturing activities that convert the produce from the primary economic activities into products and services that consumers need to satisfy their needs and wants. However, beyond the primary and the secondary economic activities, we can also talk about tertiary economic activities. And these tertiary economic activities are primarily concerned with service delivery. So this level of economic activity captures everyone from the banking industry to the tourism industry to the insurance industry, as well as the healthcare industry, among others, which are offering services to satisfy consumer needs and wants. So for a marketer to be able to determine the viability of global marketing in the market, they consider all these three levels of economic activity to be able to determine whether there is enough potential and opportunity in that market to necessitate them developing a global marketing strategy to enter that market. However, when it comes to economic development, countries are at different stages of economic development, depending on the number of indicators that are used to ascertain that level of economic development where they are. And we are going to discuss a number of these indicators. Now, the most basic indicator that marketers can use to determine the level of economic development in a country is the GNP, also known as the gross national product, which is largely based on the national income of a country. So given that you are all practitioners, I'm throwing this question to you now. Who can tell us what the GNP is? One person should please tell us what the gross national product is. Anyone?
Madam, please, we are not all practitioners, just for information.
You're not all practitioners?
Yes, madam.
Okay, so I gather you are not a practitioner?
Not at all.
Okay, please, what industry do you operate in, or what activity do you engage in? Are you a student or an entrepreneur, or?
I'm a public servant.
You're a public servant, okay, okay. But still, that makes you privy to this kind of information, or?
Oh, depending on where I work, I don't normally use this kind of information. If it is law, yes, then fine.
Okay, so have you heard it being mentioned anywhere on television or in the news or in a conversation or anything of the sort?
Oh, I have severally.
Great. So thankfully you've been exposed to it.
That is so. Just that I don't know what our country's GNP is.
Okay. Okay. That's good to know. All right. So Saliu. And okay, so Fendi raised his, yes.
Fendi, go ahead.
All right. So Fendi, would you like to tell us what the GNP is about?
Hello.
Yes, Fendi. Or who is speaking?
Reynolds.
Okay.
No, Fendi raised her hand.
Fendi raised the hands first, so I was trying to give her. I think it's a she. Or?
Yeah, it's a she. Yeah.
Okay, so I was trying to give her the opportunity. Fendi, please speak out.
I think she's lowered her hand again.
Okay. All right. Saliu's hand was up next. So Saliu.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I think you wanted to throw light on the GNP situation.
From my layman's understanding, I think it's the summation of all the products and services, the value of all the products and services of a country within a particular year.
Great, great. And I think Eva also said the same thing. Abraham, your submission is one part of the GNP. Is one part of the GNP, which concerns the international activities of the nationals. But the GNP is not just about the international activities, be it import or export, it's also about all the domestic activity that goes on, just like Eva and Saliu said. So thank you for throwing light on that. Ellen, your hand is up. Oh, okay, your hand is back down.
I realized you explained it, so that's why I lowered my hand.
Okay. Thank you. So like we have just learned from our colleagues, the GNP tells us all the value of the goods and services produced by a country within a one-year period. So we are looking at not just what has been produced domestically within the geographic region or within the confines of the country's borders, but also the country's international activities through exports and imports. Now, when we talk about the domestic activities and the international activities, the total value of all the domestic activities, be it the goods and services that are produced by the domestic economy within a one-year period, are referred to as the gross domestic product, which is GDP. So in computing the GNP, we take the GDP, which is all the domestic products, goods and services that have been produced within 1 year in a country, and then we add it to all the income generated from the country's international activities or the national's international activities through exports and imports, right? And the international operations of a nation's companies. So when you add the GDP to all the international activity, you get the GNP. Lucy wants permission to record. Okay. Please a moment. Let me find Lucy and give her permission. Okay, Lucy, you have permission now. All right, so that is it for GNP. So when we talk about GNP and GDP, we say that it is the gross, right? So it is the total for the entire country. However, to be able to get a better representation of the level of economic development and to a large extent, the purchasing power of individual citizens within the country, we use what we call the GNP per capita and the GDP per capita. Now, the per capita simply means that per person. So when we say GNP per capita or GDP per capita, we are basically meaning the GNP and the GDP divided by the total population, which will give us the GNP per person and the GDP per person. Please, I hope that makes sense.
Yes.
Yes,
it does. Okay.
Yeah.
So generally, for our public servants and all other people who are not very familiar with these terms, when you hear it being thrown around in the news and in the media and in economic discussions about GNP per capita and GDP per capita, this is what they mean. They are looking at the level of income in terms of the total domestic activity with regard to the buying and selling of products and services, as well as the level of international activity with regard to the buying and selling of products and services through exports and imports, and how it reflects on the individual citizen in the country. So by marketers taking cognizance of GDP per capita and GNP per capita, they can be able to determine which countries are viable enough in terms of whether or not the citizens in the country whom they are targeting to sell their goods and services can actually afford to buy what they purport to sell to them. And based on these GDP and GNP computations, countries are classified into several groupings. And we are going to see one set of those groupings subsequently. So let's look at a classification based on income, for instance.
Doc, sorry, I have a question. So these economic indices, we know for the classification of countries you are going to mention, some of them in terms of how the data is prepared and the integrity of the data, sorry, that's what I'm talking about, is something that you cannot question. Now, coming into sub-Saharan Africa or East Africa or Africa in its entirety, where we know there's some sort of political manipulations when it comes to the generation of such indices. As a potential international marketer, are you supposed to wholly rely on such statistics, or there are a certain set of parameters that you need to also be looking at in terms of what's actually on the ground in the country before you venture into those countries?
Good. Thank you for the question, Saliu. So generally for marketers, we will soon learn about something we call the marketing information system and the marketing intelligence system. Because of what Saliu is saying about how these data are prepared and the indices and how they are derived, people are do not really feel safe relying on one set of indices or one source of information. So you realize that before a marketer makes a particular decision, especially with regard to moving into a foreign market, they obtain information from different sources. And these indices, as we are talking about them, are also computed annually by so many different organizations, some governmental, some non-governmental. So you realize that even for Africa, there are independent institutions like Imani and other institutions like the Africa Development Bank, who also produce their own indices independent of the ones produced by the global organizations like the GATS and the UNDPs and the United Nations. So marketers are safer relying on multitude sources of information, multitude sources of these indices, and various forms of indicators, as well as, like Saliu mentioned, information on the ground in the country. And the process of obtaining all these different sources of information and factoring them into your decision-making is what we will learn under the marketing intelligence system or the marketing information system, because it is the system of information and the sources of intelligence that you have created that give you a better chance of making a decision that will enhance your chances of success in the market that you are entering into. So Saliu, does that answer your question?
Yes, ma'am, it does. I'd really like to, when we get to that discussion.
Okay. In terms of the intelligence system?
Exactly.
Okay. Okay. All right. So this is just one set of classifications. There are so many of them. We have the middle income, lower middle income, high income, we have the developing, developed, emerging markets, emerging economy, so many different classifications. But for today, we'll just look at this set of classifications. And specifically, we'll be looking at the less developed countries, in which beyond the less developed, we have the least developed countries. And then we have the newly industrialized countries, and we have the advanced industrialized countries. Now, I chose this classification because the indices that are used to determine the position of a country with regard to this classification is largely based on GDP and GNP computations. So that is why I decided to pick this classification to aid our discussion today. So for the less developed countries, these are groups of countries that include underdeveloped countries as well as developing countries like Ghana, our own. And then the main features are that they have a low GDP per capita, less than 3,000 US dollars a year. So this computation is limited to the amount of manufacturing activity and a very poor and fragmented infrastructure. So with countries that fall within this group, you see that they have limited manufacturing activity. Most of their raw materials or their productive activities are very vibrant. However, they are not able to continue through to the secondary level of activity where they convert the products from the primary activities into manufactured goods for sale. So you realize that most of the output of their primary level of activity is exported to other locations for conversion into usable products that consumers can actually purchase. And here we also see fragmented infrastructure. They do not have advanced levels of infrastructure that they can use to support the level of secondary activity that is required to convert their primary output into other forms of products and services. And then we can also say that typically infrastructural weaknesses can be seen in the areas of transport, communication, education, and healthcare, which again, we can all see is prevalent in a number of African countries, including our own. So when we discuss less developed countries, including those underdeveloped and developing countries, these are the characteristics we should expect to see, including a public sector that is slow moving and bureaucratic. And here I want to ask our public servants, please, do you agree with this statement? And does it apply to Ghana, in your opinion?
Yes, I agree largely, and it really applies to Ghana.
Okay, okay.
We agree 100%.
Yeah.
Not largely, 100%.
Yeah.
Please, I said largely. I didn't say 100%.
So we agree 100%. You said largely, we are 100%. We agree.
Yeah. So these are the characteristics of less developed countries, and our country is within this group. Now, I thought it was very interesting to see those that they said were least developed, because I was interested in knowing those that they classified as least developed. Least developed countries are also known as the underdeveloped countries. So the list that we currently see on our screen is the list of underdeveloped countries as of December 2018, according to the United Nations Committee for Development Policy. And some of the countries there are surprising. One country I was surprised to see in the list was Rwanda, because I thought Rwanda was making a lot of strides in terms of development and bringing up their economy to match up the other economies within their region that were doing well. However, this is a list of least developed countries as of December 2018. So we can see at a glance how a global marketer would make their decisions when it comes to markets of this nature. Because already for a firm to decide to enter one of these markets, it means that they have a Herculean task ahead of them, right? And one interesting thing about this list for me is the inclusion of the country Eritrea. Now, recently, as we will discuss more into detail in the subsequent slides, all the African countries in Ghana, all the countries in Africa agreed to join what we call the African Continental Free Trade Area. I don't know who has heard about it. Please, has anyone heard about the African Continental Free Trade Area?
Yes, please. Yes, Doc.
Good, good.
Yes.
And of all the countries that signed,
the head office is even in Ghana.
Exactly, it is. Now, of all the countries that signed the agreement, there was only one African country that declined. Does anyone know who that African country is?
Eritrea.
Eritrea. So it was interesting to see that they are.
Eritrea.
Yeah, so it was interesting to see that they were featured on the least developed countries list. Okay, so can we continue?
Yes, please.
Yes, we
All right. So we left off from the Eritrea situation. So I was asking, can anyone tell us, like, perhaps a reason why they would pass up this opportunity? Because I thought for a least developed country to have this opportunity to be part of the largest free trade area once it starts on 1st July should have been something great.
Yeah, Doc, I'm thinking from their point of view.
Yeah.
Eritrea, I can't seem to point out what exactly they have in terms of natural resources.
Okay.
If they have a small market that they are trying to boost internal economic activity, it would be wrong for them to open up the market for foreign companies that have a lot of muscle and a lot of financial power to come in and to destabilize the small markets. So you can look at that as a same kind of trading sort of guidelines that we have when we say we don't allow foreigners to go into the retail in the Makwala area.
Yeah.
So perhaps that could be. So the country is now trying to generate internal economic activity. If they allow foreigners to come and dominate in those sectors, eventually they are going to repatriate the profits back into their home countries. That will not serve the need for the country.
I think that's a good reason. Lucy, you have your hand up.
Madam, please, I was also trying to say that maybe they didn't get to the level, you know, you have to meet a certain criteria to be part of the AFTA, and I don't know, maybe they didn't have meet the criteria.
Okay.
That is why I'm not in. That is what I'm thinking.
Yeah, I'm also thinking it's for protection.
Yeah.
They want to protect their local markets. So they wouldn't come in now, but rather help their people to grow.
Yeah.
That's why they wouldn't join after.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, that's another good explanation. So that is it for the least developed countries. But beyond the least developed countries, we can also talk about the newly industrialized countries, right? And these are countries with an emerging industrial base that are capable of exporting, with the migration of workers from rural areas to urbanized regions on the increase. So examples of newly industrialized countries are what they refer to as the tigers of Southeast Asia, including Hong Kong. Yes, they call them the tigers because they are very aggressive. We've all heard about the protests that are going on in Hong Kong and Taiwan against the Chinese government. They are very aggressive, and they are tired of China messing with their economy. So I'm not surprised they are calling them tigers.
I know. So, I want to clarify something. Somebody said Eritrea didn't have natural resources. That is why, but they have a lot of natural resources.
Yeah.
They have gold, copper, gas. They have a lot. So it's not like because they don't have natural resources.
I didn't say they don't
He
have.
He didn't say that. Salu, let me defend you. I'm your lawyer.
Thank you.
That's what he said.
Your phone.
You have Chief Tano in your corner.
Good at all, even.
Okay, so Lucy, does it clarify that for you? He said they were trying to protect the domestic market so that they'll get to a certain level of development before they open up to the entire world.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, Lucy. Thank you too. All right. So, like I said, the newly industrialized countries include the tigers of Southeast Asia, namely Hong Kong, Taiwan, Singapore. They have been on a roll for some time now. They are the economic model for a number of other countries, including Ghana. There are certain aspects of
Yeah.
So
they are the hub of the Asian economy.
Yes.
Singapore.
Yeah. So Singapore has done very well. South Korea too has done very well with their Korean beauty industry and their K-pop industry. So they are also growing very fast. For Brazil and Mexico, they still have some mileage to go, But I think Mexico, things are looking up for Mexico with the renegotiation of the NAFTA agreement. So we are looking to see what opportunities it will present them, especially with the building of the extra large wall between them and the United Nations, and the United States, sorry. Yeah, so these are examples of newly industrialized countries. This table gives us a glance of some newly industrialized countries. And again, this is by another independent body called the World Population Review. And they also come up with their own indices on economic development and other global issues. So based on their classification, these are the list of some newly industrialized countries as of, the data is from 2018. However, the information came out in 2020, right? So they have Mexico, Brazil, Indonesia, Turkey, Thailand, South Africa. All right. And then last among the sets is the advanced industrialized countries. And these are the countries that have considerable GDP per capita and a wide industrial base. And they have considerable developments as well in the services sector with substantial investment in infrastructure within their country. And here for the advanced industrialized countries, we have so many examples of them around us, including the United States, France, and Canada. So these are the three main classifications that we discussed based on the income as the basis for determination of economic development. However, we have established that, just like Saliu drew our attention to, all these computations and classifications have their shortcomings. And there are ways by which people have been able to disprove different versions of these indices and how they have been used to classify countries. So we have understood that even though we take them in our decision making, we need to be able to make sure that we triangulate other sources of information as well. So that it's not like we are relying on one source that may or may not be giving us the full picture, so that we can make proper decisions that will guarantee our success. Right. So the last thing we want to talk about in terms of economic development is a fairly new term, which is very popular among marketers, which is called the bottom of the pyramid. And the bottom of the pyramid argument has been going on for some time now, in that there are a number of people who believe in the power and potential of the consumers who are classified as poor. Because again, there are different classifications and indices that are used to determine the levels of poverty in a particular economy. So with regards to the bottom of the pyramid argument, Prahalad, who is one of the main propounders of this argument, believes that people at the bottom of the pyramid, though they are classified as poor, still manage to consume certain kinds of goods and services. So that means that they may not have the level of purchasing power that the countries that are more developed and more industrialized and have higher levels of GNP or GDP per capita are having. However, they still spend. And therefore, in his opinion, there's still some money to be made within these markets. Perhaps not at the exponential rates that companies would make them in the more developed countries with higher levels of purchasing power and standards of living. Now, according to Kanani 2008, the bottom of the pyramid market size, when you compare them across developing economies, is in excess of $3 trillion. Meaning that there's some truth to Prahalad's argument that marketers should not just write off countries in these so-called poor economies and say that they are not able to give them any substantial returns on their investments. In his opinion, they may not make the money off the margins, but they will make the money off the volume of sales that they make in these markets. So by catering to the bottom of the pyramid markets, business organizations can create new opportunities for themselves and gain substantial value off of these new opportunities that they are creating. And there are several global companies and corporations that have shown that the bottom of the pyramid is indeed a gold mine. When you look at companies like Unilever and Nestle, who do a lot of their operations in these emerging economies and bottom of the pyramid markets, you realize that indeed there's a lot of money to be made within these markets, and they are taking full advantage of it through global marketing. So I throw it back to you. Given the explanation I just gave, have you been able to notice any unique strategy that these companies we are talking about, like Unilever and Nestle, have used in bottom of the pyramid markets or emerging markets that are not exactly popular in the more developed countries? Can anyone give us an example of one such marketing strategy that they are using? Yes, Saliu, please speak up.
Yes, if you look at Unilever, one of the novel things that they introduce for, especially for the bottom of the pyramid, is to do products and services that would have cost, let's say, 10 or 15 Ghana. They will do the bottom of the pyramid version of it, and they'll sell it at 1 Ghana.
Exactly.
So if you take milk, they have the sachet one. If you can't buy it, you can buy the sachet 1 Ghana cedi. So the person who is there will not see that he's spending, but in actual fact, he's going to be spending a lot more than perhaps the guy who is able to buy the tin one. So they have a lot of those products, and they are there in the market. So they go brand with umbrellas, with aprons, just to, you know, get the people, you know, they have that sort of that affinity to the brand that they care about them.
Yeah.
That's a marketing tactic.
Exactly. Exactly. Thank you, Saliu. So that is a classic example of a bottom of the pyramid strategy that is being used by a corporation expanding into a foreign market, right? Great. Originally, please, I don't know what the actual name is.
We have been doing same, madam.
Pardon?
M2 has been doing same.
I can barely hear you.
I'm saying M2 has been doing same.
Yes, exactly. So please give your example.
They would also, you know, initially when they started, their credit amount would range from, let's say, 5 cedis upwards.
Yeah.
And then they realized that it was difficult for other people to be able to buy. So they did, you know, a smaller units like 1 cedi, 2 cedis.
Yeah.
Go to the mobile money vendor and get something and top up and all those ones. And at the end of the day, you actually even spend more if you buy those smaller units.
Yeah.
Than the bigger amount.
Yeah. That's another classic bottom of the pyramid strategy. Thank you so much for that submission. I think Original is saying, the same MTN bundle, 50 pesos for 25 megabytes. Wow. So these are all classic ways by which marketers are responding to the unique economic environment at the bottom of the pyramid. But we can see that. Yes, Lucy.
Hello.
I wanted to find out, is it only a lower pricing that they are using as the as the only strategy to earn customers?
No, but that's one of the main
aspects where I feel they try to make sure that the product they have different like when it comes to the cubes, they do the cubes according to the country. You know, people like ginger. So they keep on adding ginger, shrimps, and stuff.
Okay, the reason why they were talking about those particular examples is because we are discussing level of economic activity. Okay. So they are looking at it from the economic sense. What you are discussing is socio-cultural stuff.
Okay.
Yes, which we will discuss very soon. So please hold the example. When we get to socio-cultural, then you bring it for us.
I will do that. Please.
Thank you, Lucy. Nicholas, your hand is up. Please speak.
Yeah, hello. So I think just recently during one of our lectures, we had a discussion on serving customers at the lower bottom of the pyramid.
Yeah.
Now I think one of them raised the issue about the cost of serving them. Now the truth about serving those at the bottom is that most of these companies producing this 1 cedi thing, they record negative margins on those 1 cedi.
Yes.
So how well do you serve them? Because at the end of the day, if you look at those at the top, it's more profitable to serve them.
Yes.
But those at the bottom, yes, you want to include them though, but then most of them don't give negative margin. They don't add anything to the business.
Okay. So I don't know if you've learned about, have you taken marketing management?
Yes. But
okay. Have you guys heard about the BCG Matrix?
Yes.
Yes, we have.
So you've heard about the cash cow, the question mark.
Yes.
Yes.
So what he's saying, interpret it in terms of the BCG matrix.
Okay.
Sometimes it's not about making loss or profit. Sometimes it's about building equity and maintaining a strong presence in the market.
Oh, okay.
Sometimes you realize that those who are spending less even go hard for the brand than those who are spending more. If they say they're doing MTN rally now, the postpaid customer who spends about 10,000 Ghana cedis on airtime will not go and stand there.
Exactly.
But the market women, those who buy the one Ghana, they'll show up, wear the t-shirts, make all the noise, give MTN the clout that they want to show that, yes, they are the market leaders. So I hope that answers your question.
You're on point, madam.
Okay. All right. So an important part of economic development that we have to talk about, which we have discussed briefly in the Eritrea less developed countries discussion, is economic cooperation. And this is done on so many levels all over the world by different countries. And they do all these things to make sure that they always stay ahead in terms of development and giving their nationals the best opportunity to succeed. So when we talk about economic cooperation, it's basically where countries engage in cooperation or integration with each other. So different countries will come together, agree on certain terms by which they want to relate with each other, and then use these terms to bind their activities, especially when it comes to trade. So economic integration efforts are usually the backbone of several of the strong economies that we see, including the European countries and the United States of America that we know. Because this economic integration helps them to be part of unique trading blocks that gives them certain advantages and privileges to be able to build their economies, to grow stronger, and give their nationals more opportunities to become successful, even in foreign countries, right? And we realize that with economic integration, some have lower levels of ambition than others. We realize that when we look at higher levels of economic integration, like the European Union, which is perhaps currently the highest level of economic integration that we can see, they are pushing more for political integration, where they have gone as far as bringing out their own currency. And then we have the looser forms of economic integration, where countries are basically just in agreement to not be mean to each other, or they are just agreeing to do the barest minimum when it comes to trade. So based on the level of complication and restriction that a particular economic cooperation brings a country, it can be either very restrictive or less restrictive. And based on how restrictive the cooperation is, we can place them in the form of, in levels, which has been put in the form of a sphere, like we can see on our screen. Now, at the nucleus of the circle is the loosest form of economic integration, where companies, where organizations within, where countries just agree that, okay, let's just allow people to freely trade among ourselves, but other things we cannot guarantee. So at this nucleus where we have the most free, less restrictive form of integration, countries can opt to be able to join other higher levels of integration as we move further outward towards the circumference of the sphere that we see, such that the more we move out, the more restrictive the levels of integration become. And we will discuss these levels one after the other. Like I said, for the free trade area, which Ghana is about to enter the largest free trade area in the world, which is the African Continental Free Trade Area, they are the least restrictive. And all barriers to trade among member countries are removed when we talk about countries in the free trade area. However, they are free to enact their own trade rules and restrictions individually against other countries that are not part of the free trade area. So the most popular one up until now has been the NAFTA, which is between the US, Canada, and Mexico. But we are praying that the AFCFTA will come into force and it will take over as the largest free trade area. And Ghana is part of it, which makes me very excited to see the possibilities that will come out of it for our nation. Now,
Doc, sorry,
yeah.
on the, okay, So I was going to ask, in terms of the worth of that free trade agreement, what are the potential sort of total worth for that agreement?
Yeah, good. So for the African Continental Free Trade Area, it means that all the nationals of all the countries that are party to the agreement can trade anywhere in Africa free of restriction. So if you want to export from Ghana to, say, South Africa, to be free of restriction, subject to the agreements in the treaty. So this is a copy of the treaty. Please permit me to share the treaty document with you. I will email it to everyone so that you can have time to peruse it. So this is the treaty document, right? It has several pages. And it captures a lot of things. Everything from the institutional framework for the implementation of the agreement to basic things like tariff and non-tariff barriers. They consider all those things. I even saw a part of the document where they were discussing specific trade remedies, including, please, does this look familiar? Anti-dumping and countervailing measures.
No.
That was what I was going to, that was a question I was going to.
We mentioned it in our previous lecture.
Yes, last time.
Yes.
Hey, ladies and gentlemen.
Please, the ladies, they were not paying attention. The ladies were not paying attention.
Hey, we were paying attention, Papa.
So why did you forget?
Did you forget?
Doc, next time, ask me the guys.
So they have captured all these things, right? Including customs, cooperation, trade, everything.
Okay.
So it's very detailed, right? And that brings me to one aspect of the environment we'll talk about, which is the legal environment. When you have countries that you're trying to operate in, engaging in these forms of integration with such detailed levels of cooperation, if you do not know the specific legalities and technicalities that are involved in selling in these markets, you may find yourself in trouble. Yes, Lucy, your hand is up.
I was going to ask the question about the anti-dumping, but it looks like you've brought it there, because my fear was that maybe products that we produce here, other countries bring the same product at a cheaper price. Especially, we already having issues with Nigerians coming in with goods at a very shoddy goods to with the indigenous companies here. So
now let me quickly show you the decision that they made with regards to anti-dumping and countervailing. I thought it was genius.
Okay.
So with regard to, I want to go to the page and then we can look at it.
Okay, but let me go. What Nigeria did recently, are they in the right of the, I don't know about agreement. So since you know, are they in the right or they were not? Concerning the AFTA agreement, assuming we were having the agreement has started and they closed their border, not allowing certain goods to come in.
For the anti-dumping.
Has not started. So
it will start on 1st July.
Yes. And I'm saying that assuming it has started and they did that because they didn't want people to bring things, they said they are rice companies and all that. So what would we say about this? Was it something that was in?
So let me show you the agreement and what it says about anti-dumping.
Okay.
So with regards to anti-dumping.
On page 27.
Yes. So we are here. So with regards to anti-dumping, what does it say? It says, subject to the provisions of this protocol, nothing in this protocol shall prevent state parties from applying what? Anti-dumping and what? Countervailing measures.
Okay, so they were right.
They were right. And even if it happens on 1st July, they are still right. So imagine that your legal team did not go into the details of this treaty. And then you people just assume as global marketers that, yay, the treaty has gone on. Like, we can sell anything anywhere. Let's take all the things we can't sell and go and dump it. You will clearly be in breach of the law, right?
Yes.
So please, I will attach this document and then you can take your time and dissect it. So I'll add it as part of the material for the class. Yes.
Thank you very much, Doc.
You're welcome.
I think, Doc, a colleague of mine pointed me that she's been waiting for a while to let.
Yes, please. I've let everyone in now. Thank you. Yeah, so that's it for the AFCFTA. And interesting enough, the EU has committed 72 million euros to support the implementation of this groundbreaking economic integration. So they have strong backing. And I see someone saying sell out to, I agree with you in some ways, because there's always a but when it comes to entering into such agreements. But hopefully the government that gets to see its implementation, whether NPP or NDC or whichever party will come into power, will be able to protect us as a country. Because I foresee the benefits from the agreement being as much as the challenges that will come for its implementation. Exactly. What does the EU stand to gain was my question too, because committing 72 million euros to such a cause. That's a good question.
That one we all know. I mean,
Facilitation fee, facilitation. Eventually they'll come back.
We all know the EU. They don't put their money where they are not going to benefit. It's the same as the Americans.
Exactly.
All the mining concessions and all the raw material concessions, they're certainly, that's it. They won't put in 72 million for nothing.
Yeah. So that's it for the free trade area. Now, beyond the free trade area, the next level is the customs union, which is a bit more restrictive than the free trade area. And here they have all the characteristics of the free trade area. However, they also have a common external tariff that the member countries of the customs union use for all goods and services that are coming into their customs union from external sources. Now, the world's largest customs union and oldest customs union is the Benelux Customs Union, which is made up of Belgium, the Netherlands, and Luxembourg, which was started as far back as 1944.
Hello,
now,
Doc.
Yes.
I can see the treaty instead of your screen. I don't know.
Sorry. Okay. Please, can you see it now?
No, please.
No. Okay, it's good now.
Yes.
Great. Sorry about that. So like I said, the customs union is like a step beyond the free trade area. They have everything a free trade area has. And then in addition, they have also a common tariff with which they use in trading with other countries who are not within their bloc. And the oldest one that we can talk about is the Benelux Customs Union. And this is between Belgium, the Netherlands, and Luxembourg. And this union has been so tight for so long. It came into inception in 1944 and has been going strong to date, to the point where you almost never hear about trade issues within this trade bloc in the news. I don't know, has anyone heard about issues within this bloc in the news?
No.
No. They are so tight-knit and are working so well together to the point where when I researched into them, I realized that there are so many things they are doing even within their union that to me is questionable, but has not been really publicized and put out there in the global sphere. For instance, prostitution is legal in this union.
It's a matter of ethical stance.
Exactly. You see, if it had, and we have other countries that are strongly fighting against things like this, because prostitution has been the source of major forms of human trafficking.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Yeah. So it's quite interesting the pros and cons that forming these levels of economic integration bring, right? Another strong one that we can talk about is the one between the EU and Turkey, which came into effect in 1995. And that was largely because Turkey has for the longest time wanted to be part of the EU, but they have not been given the opportunity. They submitted an application and everything, but they have not been approved. However, Turkey is the largest trader with the EU. So they can't afford to lose Turkey as a trade partner, but they also can't afford to let Turkey into the EU. So they had to form some kind of agreement with them to keep the trade going so that the economies can still benefit. And the best way to do that was to establish a customs union. And their union came into effect in December 1995. So those are two good examples of customs unions. Now, beyond the customs union, we can talk about the common markets. And these are countries that have all the characteristics of free trade and customs unions, and then go beyond it, where they remove all customs and other restrictions on the movement of factors of production among member countries. So factors of production here refers to raw materials, labor, capital, services. All those things can freely move across the borders of any of these countries. And to be able to ensure that the movement of these factors of production are harmonized, they also have common business and labor laws that are standardized so that it will harmonize the level of competition across the members in the common market. And a very popular common market that is in operation is the European Economic Area, and their agreement with the European Free Trade Association is the agreement is called the European Economic Area. And it's an agreement between the EU and the European Free Trade Association. Now, the European Free Trade Association is made up of Austria, Finland, Iceland, Liechtenstein, Norway, Sweden, and Switzerland. And they came into an agreement with the EU. Now, a number of the countries in this European Economic Area are not full members of the EU yet. So you realize that they are also still using their own currencies. They have not adopted the euro. Please, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So you realize that with the progression from less restrictive to more restricted, the levels of agreements and the terms of these agreements becomes more complex and complicated, right? However, the ultimate of all these is the economic union, also known as the monetary union, where the countries integrate everything, their tariffs, they have common internal restrictions against trade. They also have common external restrictions. They also allow raw materials and factors of production to move freely across their borders. And they tend to harmonize their taxation, monetary policies, government services, among everything. So they essentially operate almost like a whole country, right, with their own common currency. However, the EU has still not been able to fully achieve the ambition of becoming a full monetary union or political union or economic union, because there are still certain member countries who refuse to go all the way in terms of all the different restrictions and agreements that they have to enter into to come together as one. And we realized it recently with the exit of the United Kingdom from the EU after several years of being partial members of the EU, because they were also still using their own currency, right? And we still have other countries too who are in the EU, who are not full members of the EU, who are also having their own unique activities when it comes to trade, as well as operating with their own currency. So based on this, what are we saying global marketers should understand? When it comes to the economic environment, global marketers have to appreciate that the competitive environment can change at any time, depending on the levels of economic integration that exist and the ones that countries tend to enter into. So for firms that were previously selling out of Ghana, global marketers who were selling their goods in foreign countries out of Ghana, the African Continental Free Trade Area presents a new set of opportunities and a new competitive environment for them. Because now that the country is going to be opened up to all the other countries, all their competitors who could not reach us, or who they could not reach in terms of boundaries because of the levels of agreement between their countries, are now available to them. So you experience a new level of competition with regard to the products or services that you are trying to sell. So your domestic market is not safe, and the foreign market you are trying to enter into is not safe, because there are competitors everywhere. So we are saying that firms need to rethink their marketing, their financing, their distribution, and production strategies, especially when it comes to the economic environment. So like we discussed earlier, a number of firms have thought about the economic conditions in different countries and modified their production strategies. MTN, for instance, we learned started selling 1 Ghana cedi and 2 Ghana cedi airtime bundles. The data bundles were also reduced drastically. These are all ways of modifying marketing and production strategies to ensure that they meet the conditions of the economic environment that they want to operate in. So in essence, we are saying marketers must try to become familiar with new regulations in order to be able to take full advantage in the changing market. Like I said, this new AFCFTA agreement, marketers must peruse the document from cover to cover, because there may be certain clauses in there that if you do not understand, will appreciate your ability to effectively do business in countries within this free trade area. Please, are we okay thus far?
Yes, we are.
Does anyone have a question or something they want to say before we go on?
Doc, please, I would just want to clarify this. So it means that with this new agreement that will take effect 1st July,
yes,
means that as a country, for instance, Ghana, we cannot also put certain things in place outside the clause that we are going to sign, or all that is in the treaties, all that we are going to follow.
Exactly. So the requirements in the treaty tell us the ones that we are free to decide on, like the one we saw regarding the anti-dumping and countervailing. The treaty tells us that we are free to decide whatever we want to do with regard to that clause, right?
Please.
Yes. So I'm sure when we peruse the document fully, we'll see that there are other things that we are allowed to handle at our level as a country. And there are certain things that we are restricted with regard to how we can treat it as a country. So it all boils down to understanding the regulations and what you can and cannot do as a result of the agreements that you have entered into. So you realize that at some point, they say that they show us the number of countries that have signed, right? And then they tell us the number of countries that have ratified. Please, did you see that? Please, do you see that?
Yes.
Good. Now, the signatories means that they have signed and they understand and appreciate all the terms. However, only 30 countries have ratified. Now, this ratification means that after they signed, they took the documents back, checked it against the procedures in their country, and they are now ready to allow the terms stated in the document to bind them. So it's only 30 countries who have ratified, meaning that on 1st July, the AFCFTA document and its regulations will only be applicable in these 30 countries because they have now agreed that the terms of the agreement should bind them. Please, does it make sense?
Yes.
Yes. Good. Good.
It makes sense.
I have a question.
Yes. David. Is it David or?
All right. My question is,
yes.
Evans.
Chief.
Hello, Doc.
Yeah, Chief.
My question is,
yes.
If the country, yes.
Can we please use our microphone so that we can hear the person speaking?
Evans, you can go somewhere.
No, it's not me. It's not my hand.
It's you.
What I'm asking is that if the country has an existing agreement somewhere,
yes.
and they sign this one, does it nullify their? Does it override what is there? For example, yes. Ghana is a member of ECOWAS. Would after override ECOWAS's protocols?
Great. Okay. So the AFCFTA document also states that, and I think I put it on the slide. It complements all existing regional trade agreements in Africa. So they took all those agreements into consideration when they were developing this document.
Mm-hmm.
So they have requirements in the document that tells you how to act, especially with regard to the specific aspects of trade that are covered in other agreements. That's why I'm saying that as a global marketer, it's important for you to understand the terms of the agreements word for word.
Okay.
So that you know what the requirements are in relation to other agreements in the countries that you want to sell in. This doesn't make sense.
Okay. Yes, please.
Yeah. So you can't be a global marketer and be lazy. You can't be a global marketer and sleep.
Doc, let me also add that when we talk about ratification, for instance, in relation to our laws in Ghana, what it means is that it has actually gone to Parliament, and Parliament has assented to it by at least 2/3. It is now in part of our laws.
Yes.
That is what it means in Ghana, that the document has been ratified.
Yes. So it means that essentially we are now bound by the terms, right?
That is so.
Yes. Yes. So thank you for clarifying.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. So next we have the political environment. Now for the political environment, like our brother rightly told us, this AFCFTA has been signed by all the countries involved. However, the countries now have to go back to their individual countries and run it by the leadership and the procedures in their country to ensure that the country is okay and ready to be bound by the terms of this agreement. And that is where the political environment comes in. Because like we learned from our brother, the document has to go through Parliament. They have to vote on it and at least agree by 2/3 that Ghana is now ready to be bound by the terms of the AFCFTA. So we are saying that as an international marketer, the political environment is an environment that you need to pay close attention to because it is very complex. And it behaves on a very complicated level as a result of the interaction between domestic, foreign, and international politics at any point in time. Here we have an AFCFTA agreement, which is operating on a national level or domestic level with the individual countries. At the same time, foreign level among the 54 or 55 African countries. And at the same time, at the international level, where we have the EU having an interest in this thing, as much as to commit 72 million euros into it. So when you're investing in a foreign country, you must be able to be sensitive to the political terrain in that environment and the legal implications and concerns that it has for your business. So like I said, as a global marketer, you have to be on top of issues. Your marketing intelligence and information systems must be up and running all the time because you need to be abreast of all the political systems and legal systems and the implications that it will have on your business. So through skillful adaptation and control, which you can only do when you have access to enough information to understand the system, the political and legal risks that you tend to face when you are entering foreign markets can be reduced and in some cases neutralized because you have full knowledge of the system, perhaps if not complete knowledge, you have to a large extent enough information that you need to understand how the systems work and how it will affect your business activities in that market. Now, one interesting thing we have to talk about with regards to the political environment is several political risks that firms run when they operate in foreign markets. Now, political risks refer to the possibility of a change in a country's political environment, usually when there's change in power or change in government, that would adversely affect the company's ability to operate effectively and profitably. So a number of political risks that may come up include taxes. I remember when the MPP government came at first, they were accused of levying so many taxes on the Ghanaian populace, more than the previous administration. And all these taxes that were levied had implications for businesses and individuals. We can also talk about the political risk of seizure of assets in some government. And this often happens when there's a takeover by coup and the military comes into power. There's a lot of confiscation that goes on, where they take over businesses, especially of foreign nationals, without any form of compensation being given. Or expropriation, where they will take over the company and give some compensation. However, the decision to take over the company is not an optional one. The foreign national doesn't have a choice than to give up the company and take whatever compensation that they are giving them. Now, once confiscation and expropriation takes place, the government that takes it over, be it the military government or the new civilian government that comes up, decides whether they want to nationalize it or domesticate it. And nationalization happens where the governments decide that the government should run the companies that have been taken over as government institutions. And then for domestication, they hand it over to nationals of the country. and not necessarily government. So any national who has skills and competencies in that area can take over the company and run it. And that is with regard to seizure of assets. At the same time, a major political risk, which is very real today in countries like Somalia and Nigeria, is terrorism and kidnapping. Some countries have blacklisted. Yes. Did someone mention my name? Hello? Okay. So with regard to terrorism and kidnapping, some countries have blacklisted certain nations as countries that they would not recommend for their nationals to do business in. So in Ghana, for instance, we ran the risk of being blacklisted by Canada when the Canadian girls were kidnapped. Immediately, it was up on the Canadian website that Ghana had become a high-risk place. And countries like Nigeria, especially parts of northern Nigeria where the Boko Haram are operating, have been blacklisted as red zones where foreign countries are not encouraging their nationals to go and do business. So these are all forms of political risks that may come up when the global marketer is deciding which foreign market to operate in. So what
Hello, Doc.
Yes.
Okay, so far the examples you mentioned are from a white country to a black country. Can a black country also whitelist a white country? For instance, what is happening in the US? Can we also do that?
I'm laughing because the question here
is, you're powerful. You're powerful.
The question here is who needs who?
Okay.
The question here is who needs who, right? Okay. Who will benefit more from blacklisting who? Yes, please give your example.
I have an example.
Yeah.
There was some monetary issue in Liberia where they went to print new currencies and some got missing, almost $100 million.
Yeah.
After the investigation, the Liberia has blacklisted that company.
Yeah.
That country.
Yes.
From ever doing business with them.
Yes.
Yes, so that's an example. That add a black country blacklisting a white country.
Yes, and that is because they can afford to do so, right?
Exactly. Yes.
So can Ghana afford to blacklist the US?
I think we can.
We can.
Oh,
wow.
We try to.
Are you in this country?
Example.
This country.
Ghana tried.
I'm in this country.
Ghana tried to blacklist BA. British Airways, and they quickly rectified it. And they are now operating.
What it seems like is that we can actually blacklist companies, foreign companies, but not necessarily the country.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, that was a very, very good question. Very analytical.
Example of an African country that blacklisted everybody in Europe and America.
Wow. Did they survive?
Zimbabwe.
Oh, did they survive?
Robert,
they are still there. They are still there.
Yes, but we all know that the economic conditions in Zimbabwe.
Libya did and they survived. Libya did and they survived.
Okay, I think for Libya, they had unique resource endowments. The oil for
It's not about it. The question is, can a black African nation do that? And they did.
No, he didn't say Africa, no. He said black.
As Africa, no.
She said
black country.
But Libya,
some African
Libyans
countries are not black. They don't categorize themselves as
Libya
black.
is black.
They don't categorize themselves as Africans.
Libyans. They don't. Libyans, Egyptians, they don't. Moroccans, they don't see themselves as Africans.
They don't. They don't.
They are Berbers.
That's a good one. Okay. So as global marketers, what are we saying? We are saying that we can't ignore the political environment and the risk that it poses to us. So what can the global marketer do on his level? And we are saying a number of things they can do include stimulation of the local economy. We see that a lot of these foreign nationals always try to put some money into certain sectors of the economy to show that they are contributing towards economic development, especially into areas where the current government has an agenda. You see that there are a lot of foreign companies that rush to go and put in resources to ensure that they stimulate that aspect of the economy. These are all ways of ensuring that the political environment plays in their favor. A number of companies too will make sure that they employ a number of the nationals in their company so that in case any decision making is being taken politically that will influence them, at least the presence of a large number of nationals will put them in the good books of the government of the day to ensure that they are treated fairly. Some foreign companies will also make sure they share ownership. Recently, Airbnb tried to expand into China, and they were experiencing a lot of kickback because there were strong Chinese companies that had already dominated the market in terms of the sharing economy when it comes to accommodation. So Airbnb was smart enough to get 2 Chinese companies to partner with them and own the Airbnb company in China. And that is what has helped them to be able to survive in the Chinese market to date, where successful companies like Uber have failed woefully. Then another thing the global marketer can do is behind the scenes lobbying. And this one, we know it happens all the time. I've heard stories of people visiting the Jubilee House to do their own negotiations, people going to ministries to do their own negotiations. And depending on how it is done, it is actually legal for them to be able to lobby to ensure that they maintain their position and are able to get a conducive environment to succeed. Some companies will also simply take political insurance, where they will insure themselves against any form of political unrest, right? Force majeure. Where they insure themselves such that in case of any political unrest that puts the company in a detrimental position, they can go and claim for the damages that occur as a result. So these are some of the implications that the political environment has for the global marketer. Please, does anyone have anything to say before we move forward?
So, Doc.
Yeah.
On the political insurance, is there an example so that we can easily relate to?
I don't know of any example personally.
Let me try and give an example.
Yeah, please do.
Now, if you read the Minerals and Mining Act, Act 703, it's I think section 50 or so.
Yeah.
It tells you that any company that enters into an agreement, to mine would have to go into a stability agreement. So what a stability agreement does is to ensure that even if there's a change in power politically, it is not going to affect their mining operations.
Awesome. That's a good example.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Hello, Doc.
Yes, please.
With regards to the behind the scenes lobbying, how sustainable is that, given that, for example, in Ghana, it has become almost established that political parties, government changes in, I think, every 8 years now. Doesn't it make a company, I don't know how to put it, doesn't it make it, open to attacks if government change?
I don't know if you know of this. Who has heard of Nunu Construction before?
Yes. I've heard of Nunu Milk.
There was a company called Nunu Construction.
Yeah.
It came into Ghana during John Mahama's time. And they quickly bought up a lot of property, built a lot of high-rise buildings. They were even in Mahama, and he personally even showed up to a number of these projects and opened them personally. The moment the change of power happened, all those properties went up for sale and the company disappeared.
Exactly.
To date, there are still for sale signs of some of their buildings.
Find out who are the directors of that company.
Aha.
So maybe you should look at that. It will interest you.
You see? So some of these things, it's a risk. Some companies have been able to survive to date. When you ask some of them informally, they're able to tell you that, well, it's because they didn't align themselves with any particular political party. So yes.
So I think for this lobbying, it should be done in both sides. So
exactly, for a smart business person.
If there are two parties, you lobby the one in power and you still lobby the one who likely to come to power in the next 4 to 8 years. And most companies,
you know what happens? It becomes very expensive for the parties because even after lobbying and getting your way through, you still have to be financing them almost eternally.
Yeah.
So,
but the business
it helps you to stay, but it helps you to stay, but then you so much of your profit will be going into the pockets of politicians.
Yes, but at the end of the day, you'll be running business for every year on year. You don't stand the risk of losing business whoever comes into power. Because I know companies that are doing roads, that have been doing roads for the past 10 to 15 years, simply
exactly so.
Because they keep everyone happy, eh?
Yes.
Dela, your hand is up.
I think classical example is the Zoom Lion group.
Yeah.
In the John Mohammed administration, a lot of things were said about them, but when the power changed, even the new president was at his premises trying to say good things about him. So that is very, very good.
That's a good example, Dela. And Calzada.
Yes, Doc.
Yes, please speak up.
Yes. Look, in terms of the political insurance, I used to work with a company called West Africa Gas Pipeline Company.
Yeah.
And they transport natural gas from Nigeria through Togo, Benin to Ghana.
Yes.
So because we had a lot of political instabilities in some of the countries, and also given that in Ghana, at the end of every 4 years, we have an election. So they came up with an authority called WACPA, West Africa Gas Pipeline Authority. That regulates the 4 countries and makes sure that if there's any political change, it doesn't affect their operations.
So that's a smart way of hedging against political risk. That's a good example.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you, Al-Hassan.
The name of the company again?
What?
I've noted it.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Dela, your hand is still up. Okay, Karen.
Sorry.
Oh, okay.
I wanted to contribute to the political risk.
Yeah, please go ahead.
What a lot of multinationals do lately is that they borrow a lot in the local market from the local banks. So in case there are any political instabilities, the local businesses that suffer, the local lenders that suffer.
Wow, and that's a smart one. Very smart one. So they do not lose. It's the local economy that loses. Thank you for that submission, Karen. Angelina.
Hello, Doc.
Oh, sorry, it's not Angelina. Wow. Oh, it's Kwame.
Yes, Doc. I also know of a company. Now, what they did was that, okay, let me start this way. A company, in order not to go void or disintegrated when another political party comes into power, can always invest in itself by being the standard, by purchasing top-notch equipment, by providing the best of service quality that it can do. Now, what this Swiss company did was that it made sure it procured the most recent or the look up to equipment that even most advanced companies and advanced countries have not got yet. And then brought it into an institution in Ghana. So when there's a political changeover, the only thing they could do was that they could take the little ones that other companies can do, but the main one, they didn't, no company had it in Ghana. So there's no
that makes them indispensable.
Very good. So let's use MTN, for example. Most companies rely on MTN, most consumers rely on individuals rely on MTN. So MTN, excuse me to say, may not or cannot go obsolete in case of any political turmoil.
That's a good one. Thank you, Kwame. So we take the last submission from Angelina and then we move on. Angelina, please speak up.
Hi, Doc.
Hi, dear.
So I wanted to find out on the employment.
Angelina, you're breaking up.
Can we say local content comes to play in here too?
I barely heard what you said. Yes, I can hear you now.
Hello, Doc.
Yes.
Okay. So I was asking, on the point of employment of nationals, can local content come to play here?
Yes.
Okay.
Because like Karen rightly told us, the more they get the local economy involved, the more they are able to solidify their position. Because any action that is taken against them, in essence, affects the local economy. I hope that answers your question, Angelina.
Yes, Doc. Thank you very much.
All right. So let's briefly talk about the legal environment, even though we talked about it as part of the political environment. So here we are saying the systems, rules, and principles that the nation considers binding upon themselves also affects how you do business. So in any country, there may be multiple legal systems operating at a time. Common law, civil law, Islamic law, depending on how you are doing business and who you are doing business with. And these provide guidelines on how businesses must function and operate in different markets. So as a global marketer, you need to understand the legal systems in the foreign markets that you hope to enter into, so that you can know what the law provides for in terms of jurisdiction, patents and trademarks, antitrust, licensing, bribery, dispute resolution, and even advertising and other promotion tools, and how you can use them. I know in cultures like the Middle East, in Saudi Arabia and the UAE, the Islamic law is very strong there, especially when it comes to content in advertising and even how business can be done. So as marketers, we need to familiarize ourselves with the legal environment in these countries before we try to operate in them. So what does it mean for the global marketer? The global marketer, if he is astute, will get a strong legal team in their camp, because there's no way that as an individual with no legal training, formal legal training, you can understand the implications of the different legal systems that operate in these countries and what you can and cannot do as a business in these environments. So having a strong legal team to prevent legal conflicts and give you good expert legal advice to ensure your success is important as a global marketer in different markets. Please, are we okay? I saw Saliu raise his hand. Or Saliu, you're okay now?
Yeah, I was just going to give a funny example about advertising in the Middle East, where, you know, I think it was one of these beverage companies. You know, in Arabic, you start reading from right to left.
Yes.
So when he showed the advert was meant to be, okay, somebody was walking on the desert, he got thirsty, he found a soft drink, he drank, and he was okay.
Yes.
But they started reading from the right to say, okay, you found the drink, you walked on the desert, you end up dying.
Oh my God.
So the nuances are very important when you're going to go into that.
Exactly. That's a funny one. Thank you, Saliu. So with that example, we are entering into the socio-cultural environment, which, like he said, presents a lot of nuances that can affect a global marketer's activities. So what is the socio-cultural environment? We are basically saying that the culture of a group of people in a particular foreign country or destination has a pervasive influence on everything that they do, including their social behavior, their level of interaction, and how they even engage with institutions from within and outside their geographic region. So culture basically can be described as the learned way in which the society understands, decides, and communicates. But culture is so complex that it encompasses so many things, including arts, music, drama, beliefs, faith, behavior, rituals, customs, language, even the food is part of the culture. So it makes it an obvious source of contention, especially for marketers who want to expand into all these different markets and sell in them. So we need to find ways of being able to understand the sociocultural environment in these markets so that we can be able to sell to them better. Now, one way by which we can understand the sociocultural environment is through understanding the cultural orientation. Now, Hall 1960 introduced a way of understanding the cultural orientation of the people, which he called the high and low context cultural classification. So for low context cultures, he said that they rely only on spoken and written language in order to make meaning of situations and make decisions. So in that case, there's a low degree of complexity in their communication because, as the term goes, get everything down in the written contract. They put everything down into writing and do not rely so much on nuances like facial expression, tone of voice, physical gestures to be able to make their decisions, right? Whereas in high context cultures, they use and interpret more of the elements surrounding the message and the communication that is taking place than the actual written language, which presents a high degree of complexity in communication. So there are some cultures where you cannot go and do business by just writing and presenting a contract. No, there are so many other things they interpret. They interpret the kind of people that you even come with, their nationalities, the tone of voice that you use, the hand gestures that you use. The Japanese are famous for bowing. You have to be able to bow when you are in Japan. These are all different elements that surround their culture that influences their communication. And all these come into play in cultures that we call high context cultures. So that is based on Hall's classification. We can either use the low context and high context culture by Hall 1960 to be able to understand the cultural orientation of a country. However, there's another very popular one which most companies are more comfortable using. But before we move on, let's look at this context continuum of different cultures. And it is trying to classify the high context and low context cultures of the world. Now let's look at this diagram. The diagram is telling us that depending on the level of complexity in terms of the high and low context communication that takes place, you can either send implicit or explicit messages when you are doing business in such contexts. Now, the more you head out to the right, you are heading towards creating more implicit and detailed communication because you are dealing with a high context culture. Whereas when you move closer to the left, you are able to use more explicit communication because it's a low context culture where they require less of the fluff, as some marketers will put it. So on the continuum, we can see countries like Switzerland, Germany, and the Scandinavians being more on the side of low context cultures that use very explicit communication. Whereas on the extreme right, we can see the high context cultures, like we just mentioned, the Arabs in the Middle East, the Japanese, and then the Latin Americans being at the extreme, requiring more implicit forms of communication in terms of their level on the continuum with regard to high and low context cultures. So these are examples of some countries that you can categorize in that regard. Now, based on how low, yes.
Yeah, please come back.
Yes, I'm back. Or
yes, on this slide, yes. I find it quite racist. There is no African representation, as if we don't do international business.
Well, as anything goes. Okay, I think even on the, no, that was just a joke, but I think even on the African continent, right, you can place individual countries along this continuum. For instance, if you take a country, if you take a country like Nigeria, where will we place Nigeria on this continuum?
Japan. We'll put them around Japan.
Yeah, you have to do the lunches and the meet and greets and the parties and the Where will we place Ghana? Everything. Where will we place Ghana?
Ghana will fit everywhere, the whole line.
We are chameleons. We can metamorphose.
No, I think Ghana will still be around where the Arabs and that because
no. I disagree.
No. Honestly, it depends on the type of Ghanaian you meet, please, my brother.
Oh no, generally
exactly.
for Ghanaians.
Oh no.
Generally speaking for Ghanaians, you can have a very good product.
If you meet
have a very good
then you go to the extreme.
So are you saying Ghanaians are chameleons?
Even in
Madam,
Ghana,
you are right.
Even in Ghana,
so right.
even in Ghana, we listen to what you are saying, but we are also watching your expression.
Exactly.
How, even the hand you use when you are talking to us to actually understand what you are saying.
Exactly.
You see, so Ghana is still around where the Arabs and even the Japanese maybe.
Ghana is everywhere. We see, we are not a large
majority. Perhaps we should schedule a day and have a debate.
Yes.
Ghana high or low context?
We are the most accommodating people in the whole world.
Believe me.
Oh no,
we are in fact the center of the world.
Yeah. Okay, someone is asking about the Chinese. The Chinese will fall around the same place the Japanese are. They are also very high. The
Japanese are.
They are also very high context. Yeah.
So, okay. Madam, I can give an example of the Japanese, one that I know.
Yes.
That if you go to Japan for a business meeting and meet a businessman who gives you his business card, he expects that you hold the business card. You don't put it in your pocket till the end of the meeting and you leave. You leave still holding the card. If you put it in your pocket, he assumes that Yes, that is it. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Very good example.
The Indians too are high content.
Yeah, they are. They are.
They shake their head a lot.
Yes, they are. Infinix Smart.
They shake their head like.
Evans, is that you?
Yes.
With your hand up, please speak.
Yes, I'm Chief.
Yeah. Oh, Infinix is Chief Tano.
Oh.
Evans, rename it yourself.
Let everybody see the
post. Sorry.
Wow.
Thank you. Yes.
Yes.
It's bad. That's why I'm using this.
Yeah. Hello.
Yes, Doc, please go on.
Yeah, okay. So we can look at the low context and high context cultures in terms of different characteristics. Now, another name for the low context cultures are the individualistic cultures. And then the high context cultures are the collectivist cultures, like Japan, China, Saudi Arabia. And we can look at them in terms of different characteristics. For instance, when it comes to time consciousness, in low context cultures, time has to be prompt and exact because time is equal to money. But in high context cultures, time is equal to what? Relationships.
Perfect. I think, Doc, this will make it simple for us
Ghana.
to know where
to categorize Ghana.
Okay. This is Ghana. Oh, Doc, let's meet around 1 or 3.
Yeah.
Let's go through it.
Right. We can also talk about food and eating habits. Eating is a necessity for the low context people, so they don't spend much time on food, right? But for the high context people, eating is a social event.
I rest my case.
So based on these two criteria, we can see where Ghana falls. Right? Okay, let's do one more. Mental processes and learning, right? So for low context culture, the learning process is more lateral, right? They are simultaneous, they accept life's difficulties, and they are more holistic in their decision making. But in high context cultures, it's more linear from top to bottom, logical, sequential, right? And they go about every problem solving issue the same way. So they'll set up committees.
It's spiritual.
Ghana is just low context. Everything is spiritual.
No. That's all.
Right.
My network is not working, it's spiritual. My family people.
All the time. Right? So these are some ways by which you can categorize cultures based on their characteristics into two groups of whether they are low context or high context. Now, apart from the level of orientation, we can also use specific cultural differentiators, right? And there's one theory that has been propounded in this area by a man called Hofstede. So Hofstede propounded the cultural dimensions to be able to help us use specific differentiators to differentiate people of different cultures, especially when it comes to their consumer behavior and how their culture influences how they react towards the purchase and consumption of specific products and services. So when we talk about Hofstede's cultural dimensions, previously there were 5, and then he updated the list and added a 6th one. So we'll go through each of them one after the other, right? The first and most popular cultural dimension that we use as a differentiator is power distance. And with power distance, we are talking about the degree of inequality between people in both physical and educational terms. So when we say a country is high power distance, we mean that power here is concentrated amongst a few people at the top who make the decisions, and then those at the bottom implement the decisions that are made at the top. And in such cultures, they readily accept the difference and the disparity between the wealthy and the poor. So all the decisions that are taken and the way the country is run is done with this in mind, that there will always be people who are wealthier than others, and you can't bridge that gap. However, in low power distance countries, they believe that there should be equality. So everything that they do is towards enhancing the level of equality between the different people in the country and reducing the level of disparities. So in this context, power is widely dispersed. Decision-making is not concentrated among just a few people, right? The decision-making is done equally across so that everyone has a voice. And cultures that exhibit high power distance include countries like Japan, North Korea, where the supreme leader makes all the decisions. He decides everything from what they wear, the style of clothes that they wear, to the kind of food they can eat, how the women can dress. Even the hairstyle that you can wear in North Korea is defined by the supreme leader.
Yeah, some more.
Whereas in countries like Denmark and Austria, it's more of a level playing field where you can even find that women sometimes exhibit even more power.
That's my hero.
Than men. Who is speaking, please? I can barely hear you.
It's Evans, isn't it?
Yeah, I think he's gone.
He was saying something in line with what you were talking about.
Yes, but I couldn't hear what he was saying.
Stop talking and type instead because your network is not good.
Yeah. Oh, someone said Ghana has a collective culture. Yeah, we'll come to that very soon. It's one of the dimensions. Thank you for that submission.
Okay, Doc.
Yes.
So please, with the power distance, I think I lost it a little at a little time, but I'd like to find out. So, as a marketer, you have to consider the power distance too.
Yes.
Is that what you're saying?
If you are negotiating with someone in Japan, you have to negotiate with that power distance in mind.
Okay.
They expect you to show them respect at all times.
Respect at every time. Okay.
Exactly. But in countries like Denmark, I remember I schooled in Norway, they are more low power distance. You can't even call anyone professor. Everybody is on first name basis.
Okay. That's right. But I think Ghana too, we have some aspects like that.
Good.
Where you don't address, like my company like this, you don't address them with their title, just the name.
Is it a foreign company or a Ghanaian company?
No, it's a multinational company.
Multinational, good. So yes. they are bringing aspects of their culture to operate. So which country, if I may ask?
No, we are in 33 countries in Africa.
Okay, but where does the company originate from?
Togo.
Togo, interesting.
Yes.
EcoBank.
Just mention the company name. I think it's more of an acculturation of how multinationals are being managed, not necessarily
the globalization ideology.
Exactly.
Yeah. But that's a good submission.
Go to our ministry. It's a different story.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
You can't meet a chief director and call him by his first name. That's not possible.
We'll meet exactly.
I think UG too, University of Ghana.
But it's not easy to become a chief director.
Yes, it's not. So
I think it is trickling down to most of the private companies. Now people are not using too many titles. Apart from
the globalization mentality is catching up more with the private sector than the public sector.
Thank you, Doc.
Yeah, sure. So what are the marketing implications? Like we said, decisions in this in high power distance context are made by heads or families. So someone in this context is usually used to being in charge. So they will always enter every meeting or negotiation thinking that they are in charge. So as a marketer, you need to take this into consideration when you are negotiating with people from such contexts. Whereas in low power distance countries, I mean, everybody is on the same level. So everybody is privy to the discussion. Everyone's opinion matters in the decision making. Unlike when you're negotiating with someone from high power distance, when you enter the negotiation immediately, you need to spot who is the alpha so that you target your sales pitch at the alpha, because ultimately they are the ones who will make the final decision. So these are marketing implications that the power distance has on global marketers. Now, next, let's talk about...
Dr. Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Which category does Ghana fall under? And then which one, in your opinion, do you think is the best?
Ghana, dear, in my opinion, I think we are chameleons.
Which one is that one?
100%.
Because you find
exactly
because of who you are dealing with, the context you are dealing with, the deal you are striking. Because you see a Ghanaian in a meeting with a Japanese, and they'll do everything to get a deal.
Yes. Yeah.
See them in a meeting with an American, they'll do what they have to do to get the deal.
Yes.
Okay.
We change with the season.
So which one do you think is the best?
I think it depends on
the smart version.
The chameleon is the best. The chameleon is fine.
So you look at what is happening.
The smart version.
Look at the variables at play, and then you change your color to suit the environment. So at the end of the day, closing the deal is what matters.
Yeah.
That's all.
Mostly in customer.
So, Kruma, did you hear that? I'm going to close that deal.
Country are
going
to
I heard
culture and norms to be able to survive in that country.
Yeah.
So if you don't put an attitude to be able to go according to what they like, you might end up losing it. So if you really want a business deal to survive in somebody else's country, you need to be able to accept their norms and their cultures and be able to apply them. They appreciate it when you apply them.
Yeah,
that makes it easier.
Even the white people are paying bribe. Charlie will flow freely.
Okay, thank you, Lucy, for that. So for uncertainty avoidance, we are saying that there are certain cultures where taking risk comes to them naturally, right? So uncertainty avoidance is basically about the extent to which people feel threatened by uncertainty and ambiguity. And this will influence whether or not they will avoid situations that they are unfamiliar with or face those situations head on. So you either have a high uncertainty avoidance country or a low uncertainty avoidance country. High uncertainty avoidance countries want to do their best and most to avoid any form of risk. So countries like Japan, and in my opinion, I think Ghana too is somewhat high uncertainty avoidance. They will do everything that they have to do to avert any kind of risk. So any situation where they see that the uncertain variables are many, they will do their best to either avoid it or do as much as they can to reduce the level of risk in the situation before they get themselves involved. But in low uncertainty avoidance countries like the United States of America, they have a low tendency to avoid a situation that is risky because they believe that you have to take risk in order to make it big and succeed. So they will not expect to see formal rules and fixed patterns of behavior and different structures and laws before they take a risk. But with high uncertainty avoidance countries, there are certain structures and systems that they want to see to convince themselves that whatever they are entering into is not going to be of a high risk to them. So on this point, I was very surprised when I heard about the men's gold situation because in my mind, I thought Ghanaians were high uncertainty avoidance people. But I realized that, again, going back to the chameleon concept, Ghanaians will do what they have to do when they have to do it.
I know that.
So even though the men's gold thing was too good to be true and risky, people still went to head on.
Now the Ghanaian youth is very hungry. The youth is, I tell you, one of the days our parents wouldn't take risks, would even wait till they go to pension before they build their house. Yeah. Now 20 years, 30 years, they are building their houses.
Yeah.
We are also in the era of slave queens, so.
But even looking at the men's gold issue, the number of customers that went in, that's the total number, the population, and you realize that we still, so many people didn't go in for the very moderately sweet.
Yeah, there were other reasons,
because they didn't have the money. If they had, they would go in.
Yeah.
Did you go in?
You have something to say?
You want me to answer you?
Because we're not sure where to get their money back.
I did, and I benefited.
Yeah.
Hey, there's something I wanted to ask. If you look at what you said, that Ghanaians go to other countries and try to do what they are supposed to do to make sure they get the contract.
Yeah.
The only thing that we Ghanaians are not doing to sell ourselves when it comes to our culture is that when the people come to our country, I believe that we should also make sure that they also reciprocate the same thing so that we'll be able to also sell our culture. That is one thing I'm finding very, very difficult with Ghanaians because you go on the street and a white guy will mess up and then they tell you, or you're brony. That is something like...
Yeah, that's very true.
It's the same chameleon Subahana. That is what's made that way we are.
From a bank because
there is something I'd like to say to the
That is where my problem is, and I hope as time goes on, we'll find ways and means of how to solve that issue.
Yeah. Thank you,
Doc,
Lucy, for that. Yes, please speak, and then we'll continue.
May I chip in something?
Yes, please go ahead.
All right. You see, in spite of the fact that we cut across all the spectrum of the various cultures, we have something that is extremely unique to Ghanaians, and that's the peace-loving thing that is completely unique to Ghanaians. That no matter how we get angry or you offend us, we try to let things be, like you rightly said. So we have saw that thing across west of the that every so that is something unique to that. Go outside. If you go outside, they say, "Oh, Charlie, the Charlie." Yeah. So this is what I have to say to it. Please, you can make your point. Not that I'm.
Yeah. Okay.
I disagree.
Yeah. So please, quickly, your point so that we can go ahead.
Let's go on. It will take quite a debate. So, but I disagree with him.
Okay.
Let's talk about that over beer.
That I agree with you.
All right. So, like I said, for the high uncertainty avoidance cultures, you need to make sure that when you are selling something to them, you give them all the information they need that will make them comfortable enough to make the decision. Because the more information they have, the less risk they perceive with making the decision. However, for low uncertainty avoidance, they will not require as much information as someone from a high uncertainty avoidance culture would to be able to make a final decision. Lucy, your hand is still up. Did you have something to say? Oh, you're good. Okay. All right. Next, we have the individualistic and collectivist cultures, which is a very popular one that everyone knows about. It denotes the degree to which people in a country learn to act as individuals rather than as members of a group. So for the individualistic societies, we know that it is all about the individual and his immediate family. They only look out for themselves and the people within their immediate family. They depend very little on others, especially people of their extended family, right? Whereas in collectivist cultures like the Ghanaian culture, the Nigerian culture, the Brazilian culture, individuals have a group mentality. So they always think in terms of the larger group, the extended family, and they look after each other, right? In exchange for loyalty. So they take care of each other, they have each other's backs, and that is how collectivist cultures work. So that means that when you are dealing with a collectivist culture, you need to make sure that whatever it is that you are trying to sell to them, you are selling it in a manner that enhances the group dynamic and portrays the group benefits that they stand to gain. So in Ghana here, we see it happening all the time, especially in terms of advertising. Every advert, almost every advert that we see has a family dynamic, showing us the mother and the father in the household, the grandmother, the grandfather, the aunties, the uncles, all pushing the agenda of the group dynamic and how the product that they are selling enhances the group benefits that everybody stands to gain. Whereas in individual cultures, it's all about advertising that is targeted at individual reward. So you see that a lot of the American adverts are targeted more at individualistic people. How you as the individual will benefit from using the product, how the product will make you, the individual, a better version of yourself, versus the collectivist cultures where the target is more on promoting the group dynamic. The next one we can talk about is masculinity, femininity, and this relates to the degree to which masculine values like achievement, success, performance, money, competition, right, prevail over values like quality of life, maintaining personal relationships, caring for the weak, caring for one another, right? And we realize that with masculine cultures like the United States and Nigeria, they exhibit different roles for men and women. You can clearly see the differences between male roles and female roles. Even though the dynamic is changing in recent times in the United States, especially among Black women, because the Black women are now becoming more masculine in terms of their behavior. So the masculinity culture in the US is debatable at the moment. However, for the sake of discussion, let's just keep them here. In addition to countries like Japan, where you can clearly see the masculinity culture, where the men are up here and the women are their supporting players. So they perceive anything big as important. They value things like success and achievement. Asian children from China and Japan are always accused of being hungry for academic achievement. It is because their culture pushes them and tells them that without achievement, you are nothing. Without performance and success, you are nothing. Right? And they're also very competitive, just like our Nigerian brothers and sisters. So these are all indicative factors of the masculine culture, whereas feminine cultures like Denmark and Sweden and Iceland value small and beautiful things. They care a lot about encouraging one another, right? Having quality of life, minimizing stress, taking care of the environment. These are all soft characteristics that someone from a feminine culture will possess, because as a colleague lecturer of mine says, feminine cultures are in touch with their feelings. So they value the little things in life more. So, sorry, if you're a marketer selling to someone in a masculine culture, for instance, you need to stress in your promotion and in your communication the achievement and the performance that the consumer stands to gain when they purchase your product or service, or where they subscribe to whatever service it is that you are offering, right? Markets with low masculinity generally...
Yes. Question, please.
Yes.
I'm sorry.
Yes.
Yes. So have you noticed that in most countries, with even the masculinity, kind of culture,
yes,
it is gradually changing.
Exactly.
There's a clear weakness in that kind of culture.
I believe so.
Yes.
And I also have believed for some time now, in fact, since I started learning about Hofstede's cultural dimensions, that you cannot put any country in a straight jacket dimension. Countries, yes, countries exhibit high percentages of certain cultures and lower percentages of other indicators. So Ghana, for instance, you can't say we are an entirely feminine culture. We also have some masculine characteristics. Ghanaians also like success. They like achievement. Yeah. So the dynamic is changing, and depending on the country that you are in, you can have high levels of certain indicators and low levels of others. I hope that
you will notice that for the feminine or the feminine values, the femininity values, yes, those are the things that is sort of sustains us, like yes, the care for the environment.
Exactly. Exactly.
For instance, you care for the environment, it means you're out.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes. But it is more important to certain cultures than others. So for instance, if you come here, we have care for the environment, but it's not as much as someone who lives in Denmark or Iceland, where if you do not segregate your rubbish, you get arrested. Please, does it make sense?
Yes, it does.
So we are saying that for the masculine and feminine culture, you need to be able to appreciate the dominance of the two that operates in the country that you are selling in, and use that as a point to market your product or service to the customers in that context. Now, aside from masculinity and femininity, we can also talk about long-term orientation and short-term orientation. Now, time orientation is basically the way... Time orientation is basically the way people in a country exhibit a pragmatic, future-oriented perspective rather than a conventional history or short-term point of view. So for cultures that have a long-term orientation, they tend to value certain virtues, and the virtue of longevity and persistence and perseverance and thrift. Thrift in the sense that they do not believe in spending extravagantly, right? Because they are always thinking about the future. So whatever they consume for now is consumed based on their perceptions of what will happen tomorrow or in the near future. So you realize that a number of consumers in these markets tend to live certain modest lifestyles because they have a long-term orientation of their spending and the implications it will have for their future. Whereas short-term orientation cultures like the USA and Canada do not necessarily emphasize the long term. They want quick results. They want enjoyment for now. They want to be able to get what they can now. So selling to consumers in such cultures, you need to highlight the benefits that they stand to gain today, as against marketing to someone in a long-term oriented culture where you have to sell to them how whatever you are giving them will influence their lifestyle or their future as they are thinking about it, right? So you need to be able to make sure that when you are promoting your product and services, these characteristics, depending on whether they are long-term or short-term orientation, are highlighted in the promotion that you are doing and the decisions that you are making with regard to how to promote your products and services to these people. Recently, I was having a discussion with a friend who told me that in her opinion, the level of drug use and drug abuse in the United States is as a result of their short-term orientation. And I asked her why. She told me that, listen, when you use drugs, it gives you a short-term high, a short-term spike in enjoyment and fulfillment, just to help you escape for the short term. And that is why the Americans are using it so much. And a number of young people are dying as a result of drug abuse, because it's all for the short-term high, the short-term benefits of getting that drug-induced satisfaction. I'm putting this question back to you. Please, do you agree with her? I thought she made sense to some extent, but
100%. 100%. She makes sense.
Yeah.
Because the culture, everything is what you want, you can get now. Everything is what you want, you can get now.
Yeah.
And drugs, there, it's even worse.
Yeah. And she also used it to justify the crime rate.
Yes. That is true.
Yeah.
That's very true.
Okay. Thank you for your submission. So that is it for the marketing implications of these orientations, being time orientation, long term or short term. Then the last cultural indicator we can talk about is the indulgence/restraint indicators. Now, this dimension is basically defined by the extent to which people try to control their desires and impulses based on the way they were raised. So some cultures have the tendency to control their desires to be able to achieve a particular aim, whereas some other cultures believe in indulgence and opulence, just to be able to enjoy the benefits that they can as much as they can within the time period that they have, without thinking about what is going to happen later on, right? So any culture that has relatively weak control is called an indulgence culture. And cultures like the USA, Luxembourg, Latvia have been accused of having indulgent cultures because they have weak restraint, which influences how they run their economies, the kind of products and services that they sell, and the behavior of their citizens, right? So indulgent cultures like the USA and Luxembourg allow relatively free gratification of basic and natural human drives, which are related to enjoying life and having fun. You can classify countries like the Netherlands as indulgent cultures, where the use of marijuana became legal long before other countries even thought about legalizing the drug. Prostitution is legal over there because they are indulgent and they want to be able to gratify their basic human drives and enjoy life and have fun. Yes,
I want to make a contribution.
Please,
I think when it comes to the indulgence and the restraint, I think I look at it from a degree of different generations.
Yeah.
Because, and it works with almost all the points as well, that the people of the older generation tend to be more conservative rather than the younger ones.
That's a good observation.
And I think it applies with almost all the points.
Yeah. But that again is also debatable because there are some older generations too that is the reverse.
Yes, but when you look at it,
in certain cultures.
Yeah, majority versus minority.
Yeah. That makes sense. Yeah. Good submission, Ivan. Thank you. Michael, did you have something to say?
Thank you.
Oh, okay.
Right.
Okay. All right. So that is it for the indulgent cultures. And then the restrained cultures are those who suppress gratification of needs and regulate it by means of strict social norms. So typical examples again, North Korea and the UAE. North Korea is one of the most restrained cultures ever, where they decide even the color of clothing you can wear, the style of the clothing, how it is sewn, the kind of hairstyle that you can use. They don't even wear makeup in that country. Women don't wear makeup in that country. So use of makeup is a crime, to the point where women have been arrested and thrown in jail because they were found buying makeup from South Korea. Makeup is considered contraband. So this is a typical example of restrained cultures. We also see the same thing in UK.
Doc, there's a little observation I've made.
Yeah.
I could see that the restraint kind is usually defined with countries or political systems that are mostly dictatorial or theoretical, or let's say monarchical, or like Saudi Arabia, UAE.
China is also a bit restrained, and they are communists.
Yes, very good. So you see, it's kind of related to those ones.
Yeah.
The free economies and the liberal ones like the US.
Yeah. That's a very good observation. Thank you for that submission.
Thank you very much. Victor, did you hear that?
I heard it, please. Thank you very much.
Ivan, your hand is still out. Do you have something to say?
I'm sorry, please. Let me put it down.
Okay. All right. So that's it for the indulgent and restrained cultures, right? So what are the marketing implications? Indulgent cultures value leisure. They value sports and they have relaxed sexual standards as well. So where you find very sexually explicit adverts and promotions in countries like the US, you can't go and do the same in the UAE or in North Korea, right? So when you are selling as a marketer, you need to highlight these points in indulgent cultures, where you are highlighting the leisure and the sports and the relaxation and the fun that your brand or your product or service can bring into the life of the people in this culture. Whereas with restrained cultures, they have tight social restrictions with fewer individual freedoms. So if you're selling to people in such cultures, you need to bear in mind how far they can go with this freedom, and make sure that you situate the product or service you are selling within the confines of this freedom that they are allowed, within the restrictions that the culture presents, to make sure that you do not step on anybody's toes and you are able to sell to the consumer something that they can buy and use within the confines of the restrictions that they find themselves living in. So for instance, a promotion based on sex appeal may be very effective in a high indulgence culture like the USA, where most of the perfume adverts have all these sensual women, almost naked men, selling perfume and other forms of makeup and cosmetics, just using sex appeal. Victoria's Secret has done so well in countries like the United States because of the sex appeal, right? But you can't go and do Victoria's Secret the way they're doing it.
Body works.
Pardon?
Madam, I can give.
Bath and body works. Yes, exactly.
Works.
Yes, you can't go and
I can give an example.
Yes, please go ahead.
An example of UK. If you sell men's products,
yes,
one very good place that you can get good marketing would be in the newspaper, the Sun newspaper.
Yes.
And it is so because on the page 3 of the Sun newspaper, every single day there is a naked woman there. And
good.
That's what the men are always going for. So
good. That's a prime example. And the UK is an example of an indulgent culture.
So Doc, and adverts like confidence between your legs will work perfectly in the UK.
Yes.
Oh, for
the US. But Saudi Arabia, you may get arrested. They'll take your whole company
the concept developer will be arrested. Confidence between your legs.
I don't even want the women to have confidence.
Salute, did you hear that?
Doc.
Yes, Lucy, please speak.
Countries like North Korea, are there other companies that are not indigenous companies that are in North Korea? Because apart from UAE, where you see they have a bit indulged some of the companies from outside.
Yeah.
I've not seen the of North Korea. If you have any idea, can you share?
There's limited information on North Korea anywhere.
That's it.
All the information we have about North Korea is based on intelligence and people who have defected to South Korea. So we know very little about how things work in their system. And those who defect usually are interviewed to talk about the hardships and the restrictions that they go through. So little is known about the economy and how it operates or anything like that. The only major thing we know about North Korea is that they have very restrictive conditions and they have nuclear weapons. So if you don't them, they'll bomb you. But we don't know much about their economy or how the economy operates. We don't know anything at all, Lucy. So the lesson I'm telling you is based on what I've heard in documentaries and interviews about the defectors and the restrictions they were under and the deplorable conditions they were in. But no one really talks about their economy or how well they are doing or not.
I see, because but they are able to export their children to go and study outside.
Yes, yes,
they are allowed
yes.
to.
Because we know they have a very high power distance culture, and they are very masculine. So they value success, and then there's a huge gap between the rich and the poor in North Korea as well. So they are very wealthy people and families, and then they are also the bottom of the pyramid people.
They are still practicing the colonial Asian lifestyle.
Exactly.
Okay.
So that's as much as we know. Yes, please. You're welcome, Lucy. So that is it. As a marketer, these are the things that you need to look out for, because some cultures, even by virtue of the cultural orientation and the kind of product that you sell, may be out of bounds to you. Because confidence between your legs is a very controversial one for a very restrained culture like Saudi Arabia, let alone going to sell something like contraception and condoms and stuff. It makes operating in such a market very scary for a global marketer of this nature. So that is it about the restrained and indulgent culture. So what are we saying the marketing implications are? Marketers have a tendency to sometimes misunderstand cultures and subcultures, because we have seen that there are even multinational corporations who have been operating in countries over the world for so many years and still make basic mistakes in terms of promoting their products and services in different countries. To the point where experts and champions like H&M, who are everywhere, still to date make mistakes when it comes to understanding the culture of certain countries and selling appropriately to them.
Yeah, so, very grave ones.
Pardon?
I'm saying very grave ones. As you mentioned, the H&M, I think they did
exactly.
That was crazy.
Exactly, and this is a multinational company who should know better, right? So global marketers cannot relax when it comes to the influence of the sociocultural environment, right? The culture of one country should not be seen as superior or inferior to another. We need to give equal attention and importance to the unique sociocultural environment of every foreign market we try to operate in. Take time to understand their values, their social practices, and how it influences their consumption of different products and services, so that as marketers, we can appreciate how they live their lives and formulate the right products and services to be able to adequately sell to them and then succeed in our global marketing ambitions. So on that note, we have come to the end of our lecture. I don't know if anybody has anything to say. Oh, Saibu, thank you. I'm glad you enjoy being here. All right.
Can the recording be shared?
Yes, I shared the other recording. It's in our Google. We have a Google Drive link. Please, who is speaking?
Yes, Kojo.
Did you receive the email?
Yeah, I did.
Okay, so there's a link in the email to our Google Drive where we will have all the videos for our lectures and our slides and everything.
Okay, that's fantastic. Thank you.
So all our material will be there. You can access it. Yes.
Yes, I've checked. They're all there.
I'm glad. Thank you so much for the confirmation. Please, does anyone have anything to say before we sign off finally? Yes.
My question is, what happens if you appropriate a culture and you are unable to exemplify the culture to the letter? What is the impact of that on your brand or your business?
Yeah. Majority of the people who have appropriated cultures and done it in a way that, okay, majority of the people, the multinationals I know who have appropriated cultures and not done it completely have faced major backlash. But the interesting thing is it never affected their bottom line. So still companies go ahead to appropriate cultures day in, day out, I see in the news and the media about this company appropriated this culture, especially when it has to do with Black people. Most of these issues arise also in the United States of America. I don't know if you know of any examples in recent times.
No, but just make a reference to
the most recent example I know of is Gucci, where Gucci was accused of appropriating Black culture because they were using the designs, for many years, they were using the designs of this designer who was based out of Harlem, and he was a Black man. And Black people actually bought Gucci items, got the man's items, put pictures of the items side by side, compared them and called it appropriation because they had been making money off the man for years. Gucci had no choice than to go and seek out the man, and they actually had a formal discussion with him and went into agreement with him. I don't know if they compensated him for the many years of using his designs, as the people call it, appropriating his designs, but they were able to get him to start working with them officially. So Gucci didn't really suffer. In fact, Black people are fighting for Gucci now, especially in this George Floyd time. Someone did a whole video about Gucci.
VW is suffering now because of the current survey that they made about the new Golf.
Good.
In the advert, there was a Black man. Yeah.
Good. So this is a prime example of appropriation that ended up working well for a company, an appropriation that has unfortunately been to the company's disadvantage. Yeah. Yes. So like you are saying, you have to be smart. If you are going to do it right. Because once the people, yes.
Go ahead, please finish.
No, because once the people catch on and you didn't do it tastefully to their liking, it can bring backlash and losses.